When you don't know how a recruit's really doing until week 10, that's a problem. TrackWired's field training management software replaces old school paperwork with a clean, automated system. Streamlined reporting, knowledge comprehension, and crystal clear performance trends, all handled in one secure place. TrackWire gives you real-time insight into their field training process so supervisors get real-time visibility. FTOs save hours and recruits stay on track. If you want to tighten up your FTO program, start by going to trackwire.com. That's tracwire.com. From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court-ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tum. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, everybody, welcome back. Today I'm joined by Matt Domyancic. Matt, thanks so much for coming on the show.
It's an honor. Like I said, you're a good dude doing important things as a commander and an active duty police officer addressing wellness in a proactive manner, not right of bang after a crisis, which is so much of what the field is wait until you hit rock bottom and then it's okay not to be okay. And a lot of the high speed tip of the spear guys on patrol and specialty units, even if they're sliding that way, they don't identify with, I'm going to wait till I get a DUI, cheat on my third wife, and have a use of force go sideways and then do something about it. So you got a niche that's a little different than a lot of other people in the mental health and wellness space.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, man. And, I was struggling to figure out how to introduce you, and we're just going to jump into it, this conversation. We were talking a little bit before the recording started, but that's so much of it, man. Like, I look at your resume and all the things I've heard about you literally for years. Like a lot of people that I've been connected with through this, social media project, it spans, as you know, state lines and international borders with a lot of our, I would say peers and colleagues in the space. But it's not just wellness. It's not just training and fitness and tactics, which you're huge on. You have a huge background and we'll get into that. But it's like all of this. And that's where so much of my, I try to think about like what my mission is and kind of refine that. It's really cool to hear someone from outside the space. Actually, one of my close buddies who's a prosecuting attorney who's like, when I listen in, and he doesn't listen all the time, but some of the topics intrigue him and he wants to learn a lot about police culture to be successful in his job. He's like, man, I see it as like you want people just to do the job better. You want the profession to be elevated. And I'm like, man, that's a simple way to put it, but I think you're accurate, right? Wellness, culture, training, leadership, these are all extremely integral pillars, and you hit on a lot of them, man.
Well, thank you.
So we have a lot of people that have been like, man, you need to get Matt on the show for a while. You've been connected and worked alongside of some greats that have been on the show. Grossman, LT Colonel Dave Grossman in an earlier episode, and then recently, at the time of this recording, it's about to air, but with Tony Blauer, and then friends of ours like Nate Romas,
Collective, Mark Bouchard,
the collective dudes. Yeah, man. So what's the chicken and egg order of you in like training versus wellness versus fitness tactics?
Ooh, I don't know if it's a chicken and egg. So the way I approached sports, I played high school and college sports. I was a fanatic since 6th and 7th grade, working out, eating strict in high school, even with a mullet, long-haired mullet, 230-pound linebacker, fullback, and a jacked-up K5 blazer, was big into meditation and journaling in the mental game and reading about sports psych. And so throughout high school and college as an athlete, I wanted to pull every lever I could to be the best football player I could, mind, body, spirit. And I didn't necessarily do everything right. I wish I would have trained smarter, not harder, but that's one of the lessons learned over 40 years.
That's a young man
And
thing.
yeah.
I don't know
And then when
how
I,
you get around that.
and then when I became a cop or became a coach, whatever other role I've taken in life, it's like, what variables do I need to work on to be the best I can in this position? So I came into police work already. I had trained with Blauer and Grossman before I was a cop. I had trained with a lot of special ops guys and tactical firearm stuff, sniper schools at Storm Mountain Training Center before I was a cop. Was into the meditation. Obviously, one of my roles has been a police chaplain. I'm into spirituality. That's a whole other rabbit hole because it doesn't
No, man.
necessarily mean religion or churchianity, and some people stereotype it as that. So for me, when I came into the profession, it was a form of ministry and a way to hang on to being an athlete on a team with a greater good than myself and trying to work towards being on SWAT and eventually training other cops. So for me, the mental health and the wellness has always been a part of just how can you optimize your performance. And I learned, and this is kind of common sense, but we don't see it. A lot of the levers you pull for higher performance then become your anchors during the storm. So you don't want to wait until a use of force incident or a middle of a divorce, something blows up in the media, or you need a knee surgery, and I'm in a crisis, and let's try to eat better. Let's pay attention to sleep. Let's try to learn meditation, yoga, journaling, or try to find a therapist that's culturally competent and trauma informed when
Hmm.
I'm rock bottom or hurting. And so even with me doing all these things for performance and then able to do them during my darker or painful periods of life, guess what? It's still hard. And people want to think there's a magic button. Do paleo or carnivore, eat like me, and life is good. Lift like me, life is good. This meditation or this style of martial arts or yoga or this retreat will cure you or fix you. And it's
Hmm.
not that simple. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
It
it all
does.
goes together. And the science has shown that nutrition and sleep and exercise does play into mental health and cognitive health.
Yeah, it does. And that's fascinating because I don't think there's a lot of people that would fit into that, maybe that historical context where at your young age you had such a interest in the mental game, meditation, sports psychology. That's something where I did not grow up playing sports, but coaching as far as leadership lessons and sports psychology has it's such a fascinating realm for me because of the performance aspect of individuals and teams. But I love what you said about using these kind of practices to anchor you for when the storm comes, right? Like you don't you don't figure things out in the moment. We know that that's not true preparation, right? That's not how you succeed. Just like you don't want to be like just in front of the gunfight when you're like, man, is my magazine seated and should I press check now? Should I do all these things? And does my taser actually have a working battery? Did I check it at the beginning of shift or even yesterday, or has it literally been, a month since I went through training and I made sure the thing would turn on? Like, no, that's irresponsible. And so if we use that example and that metaphor, like it is similarly irresponsible when just because we talk about it ad nauseum, we talk about it in academies now. Many trainers will tell their recruits this kind of thing, like this job is a lot, this career is a lot. You will encounter extremely hard times. You will be exposed to all these things. And so if you don't have a good physical fitness regimen, if you don't have some sort of mental mindfulness grounding practice, if your agency, which a lot of them are they make it easy for you to meet a competent clinician. If you don't actually meet them, just to even be responsible and say like, what are some things that happen or like trend to happen with new recruits that I should be aware of? If you don't just take that free, conversation, that free lesson, are you being irresponsible?
I mean, I would tend to agree with you on the inside because I tell people don't rely on your agency. This is your life insurance policy, all of this. And yet at the same time, I want people like you and others to fight the agency, to improve training, which is what I did at Fairfax County. And it was pushing a rock uphill. But then there's the awareness piece because some people come into this profession. And what if the academy makes it seem like you're good to go? This is all you need. Here's your badge, here's your gun. You've checked the box to be certified as a police officer. And when I know most cops cannot have do not have unconscious competence with tactical shooting. It might be like barely marksmanship quals. Can you go hands on with somebody that's super athletic and on drugs or drunk? Probably not. Not with unconscious competence, not enough hours. So the agency has some responsibility, and all of us have a responsibility to try to make our brothers and sisters aware like what you're getting in the academy and in service is not going to be enough, not your tactical training, and not for your mental health and wellness. And this is like being an athlete. We don't wait until we pull our hamstring off the bone to go get treatment. But that's kind of how we are as police, either culturally or am I worried that the agency is going to cover me or not? So I'm not going to tell anybody I'm struggling mentally or emotionally. And then we wait until the wheels come off. So hey, if you're out there listening to Eric all the time, you know about these mental health and wellness issues. And if you're not doing something about it, then yeah, I think you're being a little irresponsible. And it takes a long time for a cop to trust someone. It can be difficult to find a culturally competent therapist that's trauma informed and understands the somatic effects of cumulative stress, immersion in the suffering of others, and trauma. Because you have to calm down your physiology before you can be in touch with your head and your heart. So if we wait until the shooting or the next suicide that's the same age as one of our kids at home, and then we're in crisis with a sympathetic nervous system gassed to the floor, that's like us being on the highway at 85 miles per hour, and then we can't check the fluids, change the oil, and rotate the tires when we're hauling ass down the highway.
Hmm.
So I don't want to meet a therapist for the first time where I have to build trust and rapport and give a backstory to my life a little and have a relationship until there's a crisis. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree with you.
No, that's a huge thing, and you brought up a I think a very pertinent theme, and we touch on it here and there in different episodes, but it is to say like as much as we talk about what agencies can do and the ones that are doing awesome work and doing more and more, it's like it's all like great. Not necessarily. It doesn't mean that anyone's going to use it. It doesn't mean that everyone's using it, and it doesn't mean it is the burden of the agency. And I agree with you there. I want to encourage agencies and leaders to do more to help their people because yeah, long shifts it's like hard, and if you're working 12s and you're not allowed to pick up a dumbbell at work, like that's pretty I think that's pretty antiquated. And I'll put my flag in the sand there, like let people work out on duty, but if you don't support those mechanisms, how are you helping people decompress and maintain their fitness when they're doing all that? But at the end of the day, as you said, and I would agree, it's like it is not their responsibility, right? It's we all have this we all have this agreement, right? We come to work, we do our thing, they give us what we need, but ultimately, like, no one's making you do this job. Like, we are electing to do it, and we have to do it in a way that makes it safe for ourselves. It makes it we provide assurance and insurance to our families that we're not being reckless out there. We are able to handle ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, right? So we don't get into any trouble, physical, legal, et cetera, right? And so it is ultimately our personal responsibility. I think like anything, right? Like it's great when the government gives you this or that, but ultimately, like it is on us. Like we are individuals and we need to recognize our personal agency in any of this.
I completely agree. And you're going to have to work out on your own, probably train shooting on your own, martial arts. And we, we're not doing a good job of explaining the parasympathetic nervous system and heart rate variability and how the stress and trauma affects us. And how can we pay attention to that? Tap the brakes and do our own pit stops and operational maintenance and oil changes. And yeah, we could on this job, and it's tougher for you guys than when I was a cop. But these days, it's a higher probability of either getting fired, going to jail, or even if you're found not guilty, 1, 2, 3, 4 years. I'm dealing with cops that are 4 years into a case that their use of force is completely legit, but because it got politicized in the media, man, they and their families are getting death threats. They're under a financial strain, even if they're the ones that are still luckily getting paid because they're not getting paid as much as they were. And there's a lot of things going on. So if you show up out of shape, can't fight, can't shoot, don't understand how to rest, relax, be in touch with your inner child, which sounds woo woo, be in touch with your heart. Man, I see the stories every day on Instagram and at police mental health conferences. I hit rock bottom. I destroyed my family life. I quit the job because it was too stressful, or I wasn't prepared for a use of force that went sideways, and I retired from PTSD and lost my house and my family.
Yeah, and there is value in those stories, but I think that what a lot of us need is the "so what, now what," right? Like one of my bosses is he's hot on this, which is sometimes really helpful and sometimes really frustrating, but it is trying to get somewhere, right? Like it's not just like, cool, you've identified a problem, or cool, you've identified something not working great. You have a solution, but does it actually identify like the problem? Like what is your problem statement, and then the "so what, now what?" Like what do you want to do with that? And then it flips back to me, which is good, right? That's what we should all do and exercise more. With that, there are a lot of people that speak in the space, and they have, whether it's a podcast or they go on the speaking circuit, like they have a lot of "so what, now what," right? Lessons learned, this and that. But I think what I hear you saying is like there's definitely a lot of people out on the circuit, like in the intrawebs, or they're going to talk to different police departments and this and that and conferences. But it's basically like, here's my warning story, don't do as I did. And that's kind of it, right? And it reminds me of like, man, like I grew up in a pretty insulated, like pretty safe community, suburban community. And we still had like, in the graduation rate at my high school was like really high, but we had this like this ex-con motivational speaker dude come in, and he was talking about being part of a biker gang and this and that. He's a huge dude, just tatted up and giant beard, and he was kind of like, don't go to don't get mixed up in the wrong people, and don't do drugs, or you're gonna find yourself in prison because you're a mule and this and that. And if people in prison thought I was cute, and he makes eye contact with like all these dudes and all these like kids in the audience, like they're gonna think you're cute. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, like what is this? Like, I mean, in some ways the scare tactic worked because I was already a straight and narrow kid, but like, what conversation are we having here? And is it to terrify, or is it to empower? And I would love for us to be a little bit better at empowering, because we are already so, man, we find like the negativity and the cynicism so easily already. So like, let's make it tangible. Let's make it action oriented. Like, so what? Now what? What are we going to do about it?
I'd like to view things as sports performance training, because if you're a D1 athlete, and by the way, our special ops communities have adopted the Division 1 model. We study with sports scientists and kinesiologists what are the energy demands, the strength demands, what are the common injuries. We do a needs assessment, and then we have strength conditioning coaches, sports psychologists, clinical psychologists, sports nutritionists, and sports medicine. And you're doing 90 to 98% preparation and practice and scrimmaging for the 1 or 2% or 5% of time that you're competing. And that's what athletes do, and that's what our special operations do. And so this is where it comes in. Unless you're in a big agency with a budget and somebody like you that's a commander and says, we're going to hire strength coach, sports med, sports psych, clinical psych, we're going to have the logistics with our staffing issues and somehow get everybody to go through more tactical shooting, martial arts, breath work, yoga. We're going to measure your HRV. We're going to put you through more scenario training. Like, this is somewhat on you to say, what can I do? And we know that cops have 10 to 22 year shorter lifespan, more heart disease, more diabetes, more cancer, more mental health issues, more substance issues. So we know we have the problems identified, and yet we're still doing the reactive only, most of the time, right of bang type things. Shift, and even if it has to be the individual cop, what can I do? And I have some suggestions, if you want, after you ask that question, that an individual cop can do. So if you're somebody out there that follows Eric and you're like, I either care about my wellness or I want to, and what can I do? I have 4 strong suggestions, challenges for mental and physical health, 2 optional, and then I have 2 because Eric asked me how performance is tied into wellness, and it is. Because in a nutshell, if it's a shoulda, coulda, woulda on a use of force, those are the people that are dealing more with PTSD. The job is already hard, and you can do everything right, but if you show up to a fight or a shooting and you're not prepared, you're going to have more issues. Just like an athlete, imagine if your favorite college football team was selected for a bowl game, and somehow we could say you don't get to practice for 2 to 3 months while Alabama does. How good do you think they're going to do? No strength
Yeah.
conditioning, no practice, no scrimmage. They're not watching game film. and then they go up against Alabama, who practiced up to the day before. Not only are you risking physical injury, aren't you going to feel like crap? Like, I wasn't prepared.
You'd be terrified, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or what if, as cops, all we do is walk through the plays with helmets? If I played high school and college football, you walk through the plays, then you put shoulder pads, 50% butt up, full pads, and then one-on-one drills, linebacker with a lineman, then just half the offense, defense. There's progressive overload of stress and intensity. But in police work, it's often we watch some game film in the academy or in service. Here's the updates on legislation and policy, and we play flag football just a little bit. Then the day of your Super Bowl, it's full pads with some monster that wants to rip your head off. And it's not racism or brutality. It's a failure to train and a cop that is spazzing out
Mm.
because they are unprepared. So performance is tied into wellness. But going back to the first four suggestions, one, most PPOs and HMOs have an annual preventative wellness exam, 100% covered.
Yeah.
If you can afford to go to a functional or integrative doctor, they will be much better. But even if not, do your homework and write down everything you want tested on your labs, all of your hormones, all of the blood sugar markers, all the inflammation markers, and go in and get those tested. And the sooner you do it, the better. If you're a rookie, I want to see what my blood work looks like when I'm super healthy.
Oh
So
my
every
gosh, yeah.
year, I have a gauge of what it looked like when I felt good. So get your blood labs done every year. Second of all, if people aren't familiar with the Oura Ring, I know there's other devices. I'm most comfortable with the Oura Ring. Heart rate variability is an indicator of your stress and your resiliency. It pays attention to your deep and REM sleep. And then if people aren't familiar, during the day, it has restoration. And that would be like if you're meditating or when I'm snuggling with my woman or petting a dog, it thinks I'm in restorative mode or
Hmm.
napping sometimes. Then there's relaxed, engaged, and stressed. So pay attention to the people, places, things, activities, food and drink, and timing of that food and drink, and how does it affect your stress and your deep and REM sleep. And further, whether it's your spouse or a buddy at work that's into taking care of themselves, you can give access. So me and my partner and my best friend, we have access to each other's readiness score and sleep score. So if I see my partner and my best friend on the East Coast didn't get sleep, I can check in. Hey, what's going on? So learn about the parasympathetic nervous system, learn about the physiology of calming yourself down, tapping the brakes. So blood work, Oura Ring. Next thing is an EEG. Have you ever heard of neurofeedback? EEG,
Hmm.
it looks at your brain waves.
Yeah.
Wave Neuroscience is across the country. It's fairly cheap. I think it's under $100. You can see how calm and focused your brain waves are or how overactive and distracted they are. So now we're getting objective data. Are you as healthy as you say you are? Listening is a superpower, and so many cops, you check in with a cop, how you doing? I'm good. I'm all right. Are you really? Let's look at your blood. Let's look at your daily HRV and sleep and stress. Let's look at your brainwave activity. And then the fourth thing is a sleep study. So many cops have sleep problems. And I'll say an at home sleep study is getting more accurate. They used to
Hmm.
always suggest go to the lab, but they wake you up. You have a ton of stuff in your head and your chest. They
Hmm.
have a
Yeah.
fairly accurate at home sleep study that most insurances cover. So if you're a side or a stomach sleeper like me, it'll be more representative of what you're really doing at home. So those are the four suggestions suggestions or challenges. So now I have data. Am
Hmm.
I as healthy as I thought I was? And now in 6 months or 3 months or a year, if I add in better nutrition, if I'm doing sleep hygiene, I started a yoga class, I started dance lessons with my wife. There's 1,000 things you can do to improve your mental health and well being. Well, now you can track it. The two additional tests, if you're somebody that wants a wake up call, go get a DEXA scan. It measures your body fat and really good for females, their bone density. It's 40 or $50 in LA. Hopefully it's affordable and elsewhere. So DEXA scan. And at least for guys in their 40s and 50s, coronary artery calcium scan. It's kind of like a pre-heart attack indicator. But depending on where you are, maybe you're jacked and ripped and you don't need to know your body fat. But those 6 tests could be the possible wake-up call to wellness. And our mental health is tied into our physical health. Our physiology is affected by stress and trauma. So those are the first tests I would do. Now, concerning performance, a use of force incident is the worst case thing that happens to cops that cause them so much stress these days, because the media, the politicians, and the district attorneys will scrutinize and expect perfection as if you are trained like a Division I athlete or a Tier 1 operator, but most cops are not. So these two challenges would be less stressful than a real use of force. Sign up for a jiu-jitsu, MMA, a boxing, or a judo tournament. Go see if you can go the distance. You don't have to worry about your radio, your gun, your taser, your baton or asp, or any other tools on your belt. And if people understood motor skill development as well as complex decision making, for every other option on your belt, and then the carbine and less lethal in the car, that layers in the need for more training to make good decisions under stress. If I'm in a jiu-jitsu or an MMA fight, it's just fight. And guess what? If I win and dominate, I'm not going to risk getting fired because it looked too violent, and I'm not going to go to jail for a crime. And then if I lose, my ego might be hurt and I might be sore from getting my ass kicked, but I'm not going to be hurt or killed.
Mm-hmm.
So can you sign up for some kind of hands-on martial arts competition? And then the second thing would be sign up for a shooting competition like a concealed carry, IDPA, or steel plate, IPSC. Those are shooting and moving. And again, no radio, no handcuffs, no shooting, and then transitioning to the radio, then to tactical medicine. Man, so many responsibilities. I'm just focused on shooting and moving. And maybe people would see that the 15-year-old girl that's trained by dad could smoke 50 or 80% of cops. And I'm not saying that shooting competitions or MMA or judo or jiu-jitsu are directly applicable to the street. But if you're not comfortable and are not willing to practice doing some extra shooting and signing up for martial arts for a couple months and entering one of those things, that's a lot less stress with less risk than being in a real use of force.
Yeah, yeah, you said a lot there, and we'll start with what you just were talking about, and I think that is a really healthy challenge to consider, and then see like, do you want to be like your most proficient? And these are ways to test yourself and or like inject some different variety of stress, right? I also recognize that like for someone like me, that might sound way more stressful actually, right? Because think about how many times people are in a use of force, and a little bit of confirmation bias, right? Like, okay, I've been in some difficult fights. I've been, this and that, dozens of arrests where people resisted, and a few where I got assaulted or my buddy got kicked, this and that, right? I'm thinking about a lot of cops in busier agencies, but each time they're like, cool, I always won, I always won, I always won. But then you go on the mats and you're like, you're getting folded up by, a 19-year-old. So it is humbling. So I think like it is a couple things. I do agree with you, and yes, it is a different level of stress, but although there are aspects that might feel way more stressful, also like recognize what it is. It's not the same. It's not a street fight. You're not going to pick up that 19-year-old when he pulls guard and slam him, which you could do on the street if someone pulled guard and you're like, oh my god, this guy knows what he's doing. But it is to say like it's humbling. You are learning a different skill set that will translate well. But then at the same time, I want to take this conversation to like elective training, because more and more departments are doing some sort of like a mat club or, this and that. Maybe it's not mandatory, but a lot of people shy away from that. A lot of people shy
Mhm.
away from the working out on duty because they don't want to get sweaty or they don't want to do this. And it is like, I know that there's going to be listeners that are like, oh my god, I wish to god that my agency did those things. And so recognize that, right? If your agency is allowing you to do certain things, like do it. I think when you cut back to like younger you before you came to this job, you're like, cool, you get to shoot on duty, you get to learn how to do all these amazing like literal skills, like hard skills, like pretty badass stuff. But then you're going to elect, fast forward 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to elect not to, because you don't want to be sweaty at work when you're getting paid, and you could shower, or you get sweaty this time of year anyway, right? Like just standing on the street flagging, after an accident. So I'm kind of inviting people to challenge where they're at or what their response is as you're laying out all these things, because our ego our ego is the enemy, right? Oftentimes we hear something, we're like, ooh, that sounds scary. Or, oh, I can think of 5 reasons why not to do what Matt just said. Even cutting back to blood work, man, like to get that baseline before you're a cop, let's just see where your cortisol levels are at, right? Let's see how your thyroid and your adrenals are functioning, because by the time I got started getting into blood work is because I had sleep issues and I had these issues, and my blood work was dismal because I had sleep issues. And so it's all like kind of compounding. But just to recognize, like, yeah, most people have good enough insurance where it's very little out of pocket. Maybe it's a copay, but just get that stuff. Like, the average person does not have the type of benefits that a lot of cops have. And so it is a luxury. Like, let's not ignore and shuck away the luxury, whether it's being able to, get some coverage on a sleep study, whether it's being able to train on duty, whether it's being able to learn these things, at work while you're getting paid. And so that's kind of like a summary of a few things that you brought up that I just want really to, I want to challenge people to recognize if they're pushing some of these ideas away, or if they're shucking it away. And maybe I will take it here because I I've pondered this over the years, whether a lot of people don't want to know the truth. Like, one of the things, yeah, like, and so if people are listening and they're like, dude, Matt came prepared. Yeah, he did. Like, we were messaging a bunch and you're like, dude, I got pages, and he'd keep pitching different ideas on some of the prompts and some of the thoughts I had. I'm like, man, like, okay, I can't overplan this because you got like just volumes and tomes of information in your head, and we're just gonna have to see where it goes. But I think so much of it's like, whether it's the first responder, the cop, or whether it's the cop's spouse, or whether it's the teenage kid looks at mom or dad, there has to be a part of them that are not in shape, that the whole family and themselves are like, dude, I don't want to get in the weight room because I'm going to expose myself, and I'm going to wear this literal armor and this uniform suit of armor and this gun belt, and it's going to save me because I'd rather not face the truth.
It's so hard, and so many things that go on in our lives is unconscious. The unconscious pushing away of the truth of maybe I'm not ready to be in my worst case scenario. And it's the pushing away of after I've dealt with a suicide or a molested kid and I have feelings around it, but we're not supposed to have feelings. So move on to the next call. We're unconsciously pushing these things away. And so, do you define what your values are and your greater good and the most important things in your life? And is it worth it for me to love? Do I love myself enough that I want to do good on the job and come home at night to my spouse or even my parents or my children? And I want to be there for my partners. And what will it take? And cops, notoriously, I did get training approved, more training at Fairfax County, tactical shooting, DT scenarios. And I did all this research with pulled their heart rate on scenario training to show command staff that cops will blank out, take forever, make mistakes. Their heart rate's all over the place. And like patrol doesn't do as good as full-time SWAT where their heart rate's flat, blip, they get it done, no mistakes. And I'm like, hey, this isn't saying SWAT's better. SWAT works out every day. They're in the shoot house. They're at the range. They're operational. They get sexy tactical schools, but they're not first on an active shooter. They allowed me to put on more training where all the instructors were SWAT or jump out, the full-time tactical units. These are mostly guys that worked at the busy ghetto stations, busted their ass to make a full-time tactical team. So they had credibility, because sometimes you can go to an academy. That guy's been off the road 5 years and worked day shift at a slow station. So I'm not going to pay attention. So I got all the varsity guys teaching these courses, and we're teaching lethal force psychology from Dave Grossman. Also, Dr. Paul Whitesell is an old school guy you should look up. He doesn't have much online. And the SPEAR, spontaneous protection, enabling an accelerated response, from Tony Blauer, and the fear loop, the psychology and physiology of a sudden violent encounter. It was paid, and not everybody wanted to come because it's hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I put on elective training in LA for many years with the DEA. I would get high-speed strength coaches, UFC athletes or coaches. I gave away free supplements. And I even put on free retreats now and some free training. And you have to beg cops to come, and they'll be like, if I'm not getting overtime, if work comp's not covering me, if I'm not getting comp time, I'm not coming. But then it's like, what if you're in a shooting tomorrow and then you and your family are getting death threats for the next 3 years, or you get hurt or killed because you couldn't handle business? So I don't know, Eric, what the answer is for people that are pushing it away and unconscious to it. All right, so I dropped 6 mental, physical data challenges. I dropped the shooting competition. Hey, if you're in a metropolitan area, most boxing, jiu-jitsu, krav, judo gyms will give 1 free week of training. Can you just say, I'm going to bounce around and try judo and krav and Muay Thai? Nobody even needs to know I'm a cop. And I'm just going to see if I can physically go through some like focus mitt drills. And if I'm dying, maybe this is an indicator I just need to hit the gym a little more, even if I'm not ready to do a
Mhm.
martial arts class or enter a martial arts competition. So I don't know what we do to resolve that problem. That there's a lot of cops that don't want to train unless they're getting paid for it. And then there's a lot of cops now that don't want to be around cops off duty if there's really bad morale, because it used to be a job that most people loved and
Mhm.
got after it. Now it's like walking on eggshells, sanctuary trauma, organizational betrayal. Does the DA want to put us in jail? But that's even more so. Wouldn't you want to be prepared so you make smart decisions so when you are scrutinized? So that's a lifelong dilemma, at least in my time. How do we get cops to take their
Yeah.
training more seriously, whatever it might be?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that it's like every that and everything in between, right? And you even pointed out like someone might like have that awareness point where they're like, my cardio sucks. I know what to do, right? Maybe they can harken back to their younger years and their athletic days or whatever, or they're just like, man, clearly I need to start at like the elliptical. I need to be on that bad boy for 20, 30 minutes and then just lift some weights, like 3 sets of 10, don't overthink it. Do some pushing, some pulling, some squats, just body weight stuff, whatever. Like start somewhere. And man, you clearly have a background in the physiological impacts, the psychological, emotional. Like you kind of touched on your chaplaincy and looking at like a ministry, and so it is. I think anyone has gathered at this point, like you are very holistic in your approach. Although you're talking about one thing, you're recognizing and highlighting and nudging at the fact that they're connected with all these other spokes of the wheel, and that's where I really encourage people to start. Is like look at all the spokes of the wheel, right? Like physical, emotional, family, your relationships. And you could go more detailed into like, okay, my friends at work, my friends that are not cops, my family members, right? My spouse, my family unit. You could also look at, just like your relationships with like boss, like maybe like a typical maybe you're not buddies, but like you want to make sure that you can do something or be working towards ways to make each of these little tentacles a little bit better, right? So the physical fitness a little bit better, and maybe like when the next elective mat day is coming up later in the week, so you're like, okay, cool, like I'm committing, I'm putting in my schedule, I'm telling my boss, I'm going to that thing, and I'm limbering up the week, like kind of leading up, like, and I'm going to humble myself and be like, I'm going to talk to the trainer, hey, I'm coming, don't break me. And then, of course, any good trainer is like, absolutely, we will not, right? Like, we want to build you up and we want to, get some good reps in. So I think that like there's a way to dial it back and make it less scary and make it less tenuous, right? A lot of people might be listening in, might be like, okay, I'm super fit, but finances are stressful. And because finances are stressful, I'm working more overtime than I want to. And it's making more, I'm recognizing it's making me more snappy at work. My buddies are like, dude, do not get this us into use of force. I'm being more snappy at home. And then so when you take a pause and you reflect, you might realize where some of these spokes might need more attention. But I think if we just recognize where we're strong, let's maintain it, and where we're weaker, let's do a little bit of something to get closer to. I think that we're going to make a lot of big strides, but it does seem like eating the elephant sometimes.
What was that last thing you said?
Eating the elephant, like it seems like insurmountable, where you just got to take one bite at a time.
Well, well, hopefully, I'm glad you said that. When I'm talking to people one on one, I wouldn't throw down, do all these things, and go sign up for a fight. And it
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
there's things is just take increment 3 times 10 minutes a day walking reduces your chance of death or dealing with the disease by something like 67%. Most of us are on our phones 30 minutes a day. So can you walk 3 times 10-minute walks a day, 3 times a week? That's an improvement. Can you pay attention if you had this to dialing in your sleep a little better, sleep hygiene? And I mean, that could be a whole show in itself.
Yeah.
So take little chunks. And even if it's not, I'm going to jump to keto, carnivore, vegetarian, paleo. Everybody's got these. There's a lot of different ways to eat healthy. How about I'm going to go from 3 coffees or 3 energy drinks a day to 2?
Hmm.
And how about I'm going to go from 3 beers before bed to 2? Just start backing off in little ways, things you know that aren't good for you. And then you gain inertia and momentum. So I'm glad you pointed that out, because I am not the person that would tell everybody, you better be doing everything full speed
Yeah.
and perfectly. Like, grab low hanging fruit so you can achieve some success, and it gives you inspiration to do a little more.
Yeah. Yeah. Dad joke. The low hanging fruit this time of year is berries, like blackberries and blueberry. Yeah, pick those because they're amazing for you. But no, like I love that because yes, like Matt is giving us like he's throwing the kitchen sink on purpose because as we were messaging, he's like, man, I feel like most people that listen in, they're probably going to be about their fitness. They're probably going to be about personal ownership. I would say yes. However, that looks different for different people. And then a lot of people, they might be all about it, but I also recognize because of the feedback I get and people that listen in, a lot of them are like us where we might toggle taking on a little bit too much. We might toggle, putting ourselves out a little bit too much for those at work. And I've admitted this a little bit on the podcast, but I think it's helpful not to make it about me, but I think I would suspect that a lot of people grapple with this. But, not super long ago, my wife was like, I wish that you turned on sometimes like the way you do when one of your guys or gals at work calls you or texts you. Like you like light up and or like you like step into the room because they're going through something. Like I wish I had like a little bit of that. And this was at a time where I was imbalanced and I was deprioritizing home. A little bit of it being like I think the world of my wife. I think she's a rock star and she's tough and she can handle her stuff. But we all have moments where we just need like 100% focus, right? And intentionality. And so I just share that because I know that is a big theme for first responder types, for cops that are trying to do a lot. Like we are. I mean, some of the most selfless people I know are because of this industry, right? And in this industry, they put others in front of themselves all the time, but that does carry over into the home life and the off duty life as well.
If your well goes dry, you can't give other people a drink of water.
Hmm.
And also, pain that is not transformed is transmitted. And if you don't heal what hurt you, you will bleed on people that did not cut you. Usually ends up being the family. And this stuff, these are deeper conversations. If you've ever heard of archetypes, the
Yeah.
warrior archetype is the alpha male, alpha female cop, type A, loves getting things done. And then later in life, I believe cops get something that Carl Jung called the second half of life. Cops get an invitation to that much, much earlier than civilians because of all the trauma and adrenaline and realities they face. And this is for a lot of veterans, especially special ops veterans. This is for the alpha cops that love the job, that might need to train smarter, not harder, take the foot off the gas once a month. I'm going to take a pit stop and get a massage and try an art class or do a float tank, cold plunge, sensory deprivation tank, turn my phone off for half a day and spend some time in silence, solitude, immersed in nature, fasting from technology. And it sounds woo woo, right? But there's the lover archetype, and
Hmm.
that's our partner and our children. And a lot of like badass special ops guys and cops love their family, but the warrior archetype has been in the driver's seat for so long, it's hard to do that transition. And we're not talking about it or teaching people how to do that. And some of that is tied into this parasympathetic nervous thing and looking at your HRV and your EEG, because there's a lot of the guys and gals, you're on the highway doing 85 miles per hour and you're having a hard time taking your foot off the gas, go into a garage or a driveway, let the engine be turned off, cool down, and do that operational maintenance or those pit stops. And that's when we can be more aware of our thoughts and feelings and then reevaluate. I'm a commander now, I'm this many years old. Is it really about building my resume, my bank account, external validation, proving things to other people? Or am I kind of good now?
Hmm.
Like, I've done enough that I feel good about myself. I don't have anything to prove to anyone else. And now I want to tap into the deeper meaning and purpose of loving on my spouse and my children, and also loving on people at work in a different manner and teaching the lessons before, they may come to a crisis. I took
Yep.
some very deep topics and like
I
condensed
dude,
it.
I love it because I made a note here on the side. It was like when you talked about inner child and you mentioned woo a couple times now, and I'm all about discussing and having people open up to the woo because there's another kind of defensiveness that comes with that. Be like, oh, okay, hippy dippy, but this is all connected, folks listening. And so, when you mentioned, I have a couple books on archetypes behind me, and so yeah, the four I think that you're referencing kind of being like the warrior and then a lover, you mentioned the king and the magician, or
Gillette and More. Is that what you're reading?
yeah. So I've
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
read that. I need to revisit it. But then yeah, the Jungian archetypes, and these are kind of these symbolic or kind of these patterns of energy. I think that we can all resonate with, and clearly, especially with police, military veterans, right? We resonate with the warrior, right? We literally carry weapons on our hip, and we're out to defend those that can't defend themselves. However, like yeah, there is a shift in energy, and even as you're talking about, okay, like the sense of self and midlife, and I'm approaching that, and so it makes me think of like the king archetype where you're like, hey, like it's not about oppressing or ruling everything, but it's like no, you're the ruler of yourself and your life and your sphere and your family and your actions, right? And so there's a self-assuredness and a confidence there, whereas like if I remember correctly, like tell me what your spin on it is, but with like the magician, more like think like a wizard, kind of like thinking beyond and understanding beyond. Like it almost makes it like all the warrior stuff is noise at a point where because you're just more connected and in tune. And that might be the most woo, if we look at all these different archetypes.
Man, there's so many things. And what pops up for me is when we say woo, and do people cuss on your podcast? I forget.
Yeah,
And I don't want to offend
yeah,
anybody.
yeah. They do.
I've heard this hundreds or thousands of times, sitting with sleeved up deputies that have been in 2 or 3 shootings, Navy SEALs, Green Berets. People will be, say, on an outdoor retreat or say, I used to go cold plunge, sauna, float tank with cops, and then we'd walk on the beach. Or I do jujitsu peer support, which is tactical shooting, jujitsu, cold plunge, breath work. And then I get real about mental, emotional, physical, not just the hard stuff, but the rest, relax, recovery, and spiritual. And so, say I'm on a retreat or I'm at the beach with a cop or ex Green Beret, they start sharing their feelings. And this is also, I worked at a rehab for cops and firefighters during COVID. The warrior archetype will immediately say, I'm so sorry. Once they start sharing a story around feelings, I'm being a bitch. I'm being a fag. That was gay. That was weak. I'm not broken. I'm not crazy. It's like, nah, dude, this is normal. Like, we don't let people feel their feelings and share their stories. And just because you have feelings doesn't mean you're still not a warrior. And the things that the warrior's good at, work ethic, discipline, having higher values and ideals that you follow, can be applied to the other archetypes. And part of the king archetype maybe isn't what we see people wanting as influencers in our society. A real king is affirming and encouraging other people, is not worried about self disclosing or sharing their resume or what awards they won. Man, I want other men, all people, but I want other men to step into the truest version of themselves. And being in touch with your head and heart doesn't mean you're weaker. I believe you can be a better athlete, a better cop, a better firefighter. And for our veterans that have transitioned out, whatever their next career is, you can use that experience as the warrior that's been initiated, because so many people in our culture have not initiated the warrior archetype. There is a lot of softness in our culture and lack of responsibility, accountability, and discipline. So you can take the lessons from the warrior archetype and apply them to the other ones if we were maybe more open about it, right? It's just so stigmatized still. And I know the younger generations may be more open to, say, therapy and yoga and journaling, but there's really something drilled into first responder, veteran culture, and just men of not being in touch with their head and heart. And dudes take their feelings to the grave: drinking, drugs, suicide, sleeping with people you shouldn't sleep with, video games, working overtime, buying toys. And I say a lot of alpha males drive their own body and car, like a stolen car. Check engine light comes on. They put a piece of black electrical tape over the check engine light,
Hmm.
mash the gas pedal more. They hear knocking, they turn up the stereo so you don't hear the engine knocking until they wrap it around a pole or something blows up. You got to have another man that you respect. And this is no offense to other chaplains or mental health professionals out there, but a lot of these sleeved up dudes that tell me, oh, I'm being gay, and I got to say, no, you're not. This is all right. They say, hey, if another chaplain's elderly and grossly out of shape and they only show up at the station after a critical incident, I don't care. If they say the same thing as you, I don't feel seen, heard, or understood. I kind of feel judged. They don't understand me, and then they're trying to fix me.
Hmm.
And if a lot of the therapists are, and this is, I don't want anybody to get mad at me. I'm translating what I
No, for
hear
sure.
every week.
Yeah, no, we should discern that
I
for
don't
sure.
want a middle-aged, frumpy female that's never been punched in the face and never worked out in their life. It shouldn't be that way, because my therapists and my mentors are not badass athletes, cops, or veterans. But in our culture, if the only people that are saying it's okay to be in touch with your head and your heart are people that they don't identify with or think they don't see the warrior in them, then it's suck it up and drive on. And hey, I mean, unless it's changed, does every police department have people that give the badge of honor to the guy that says how much he chews, how much coffee he drinks, how much beer he drank last night, and who he banged? And then we high five that guy, or somebody talks about cheating on their wife and everybody just chuckles. And I'm not saying shame or guilt trip, but like pull somebody aside. I love you, brother. Even if maybe you should get a divorce, can you do it in a way that if your kids find out that you're already, quote, banging someone else, that they don't disown you and you ruin their life? Can we love each other more? Or is that too soft to say?
Hmm.
But really, man, if we love our brothers and we got their backs on the street, how come we can't love each other more about being the truest version of yourself emotionally, character, and integrity wise?
Yep. Yeah, and that's what shouts out to me, right? We've talked about that a couple times where it's the integrity, and it's not to shame or blame. There's a lot of people that share their story and they learn their lessons from, but these are like maladaptive coping mechanisms, right? You listed off a litany of them to include video games, sex. That's a thing that we've touched on before, but it ultimately is like, whether it's that or the Carl Jung, and then as you're talking about like the midlife, second life kind of like reflection point that I'm at, and like I've literally been thinking about all year. And sometimes it's like really there's a release, like, oh, awesome, and then there's sometimes like, man, what else? Like then I put this pressure on what I'm gonna do with this second half of life. But yeah, James Hollis, and we could go on and on. Yeah, right. Like
You
same
read James Hollis? Good man.
dude. I
Good man.
audiobooked it, but that
Which
is
book did you read of his?
which one is it's one specifically about like the second half of life. I can't
Okay. He has
remember.
two,
Okay.
but one is called The Second Half of Life. The other was Living the Examined Life for guys like you. And there's not many cops that can go through James Hollis. I got an Idaho SWAT guy that's
Mm,
dove into him recently, and I'm so proud of him. But Under Saturn's Shadow, The Wounding and Healing of Men. That is one of
okay.
Hollis's greatest books
That's the
on
next one
masculinity.
then. That's the next one. Man, yeah, we're gonna have to peel back another episode a different time, but we're not wrapping just now. But yes, yeah, I did read the one on the second half of life specifically, but I made a note on diving into more. But it is like, I mean, it is recognizing, as you're saying, we need to love each other better and support each other better. And a little bit of that is like, you could call it the calling up, right? Not calling out, but like, hey man, like, is that what we're about? Is that the story you want to be told? Are you telling yourself that? We talk about integrity, integrity, integrity. You lie, you die. If someone lies in a report or lies about an arrest, like you're cast out, shame, shame, shame bell, right? And like you're not one of us. However, like what are we doing in our own households and our own personal lives? And again, that's not like, I'm not saying if you did that, like I don't look at you like a teammate, like a brother or sister. It's just to say, like, do we want to keep doing that? And do we want to learn and grow better? And a lot of times there is that hurt. Like we do these things because there is that shame. You talk about inner child. I just saw this reel and I'd seen it before, but it was basically someone speaking, I think it was on Lewis Howes' show, but talking about the origin of heroes and villains and how the beginning is the same. Oftentimes it's, orphans or someone in some seemingly insurmountable hardship, and then they grow into their power and use their power for good. Villains, very much similar, right? They were also usually orphaned or injured or scarred, or the deck was stacked against them. However, they dwelled and they lived in that hurt, and then they projected that hurt upon others. And I think that a lot of cops can resonate with that. I know personally because having been part of hiring so many and talking to so many on this show and in just general life, like, yeah, when we talk about why we came in, it's usually like something messed up happened to us, to our families, to someone we knew, someone we saw working somewhere. You saw this terrible thing, and you're like, I'm going to do something about that. And I think it is really empowering and really important to recognize that, not just for a continued sense of purpose and like, why are we doing the things we're doing? Why does fitness matter? Why does actually talking about our feelings and processing inner child stuff, like the stuff that happened as kids, because there is a carryover, shout out to IFS and Robin Saunier in a prior episode, and all these conversations intersect here. But then like so what now what, like, okay, what are we gonna do about it so that we can be our best, we can be best for our families, for our teams at work, for the public, for the people, the victims who are in dire need of our help and service, and how do we serve in this best way? And that's really what this is all about, right? This is what this conversation is all about. That's what the podcast is all about. I'm gonna stop because I need to hear what you're saying. You're taking notes, and I know,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot of info
You're
bounced around.
touching on so many important things, Eric. And like, I'm so proud of you because most men your age even aren't dipping their toes into learning about these things. So, and I want to make sure that anybody out there that maybe is the badge of honor that's talking about banging girls and drinking, dude, it's not your fault. You know why? Most likely, most people have a father wound or a father hunger. We didn't have a father that role modeled the warrior archetype and the lover and the king. And then the second half of life, people like Richard Rohr, Bill Plotkins is another great author that talks about loyal soldiers. Are you aware of the patterns that are no longer serving you? And if we had more time, I'd explain that. But Bill Plotkins, James Hollis, they'll say maybe only 5 to 15% of our current culture, especially men, really takes the invitation to the second half of life. So if we didn't have a good relationship with our father, and some studies say that only 16 to 17% of men can say they had or have a meaningful and positive relationship with their father. And then if we don't have many male teachers and coaches, and these days they can't be more disciplined, maybe like at least when I was a child and maybe even still in your generation. But if we don't have the appropriate mentors, elders, and role models, especially in the warrior community, teaching us these things, we don't know any better. And it's pain that's not transformed is transmitted. This is all untreated PTSD, a lot of it.
Mhm.
This hurts. I'm not conscious of it. This hurts me. I'm going to drink and I'm going to screw and I'm going to buy a dirt bike or put a lift kit on my truck. You don't know you're doing that. And so we have to teach people that these things are an invitation to the second half of life. And this ties into things our cultures no longer do initiations or rites of passage. And these are lessons you would learn as an adolescent boy that we don't even teach our men. So, like, even in the last little bit, you were talking, and I wanted to be like, bro, and anybody listening, I don't think me and Eric are saying, hey, you're a scumbag if you're not training or not going to therapy. If you did these things, it's like, brother, what you're doing is normal when
Mhm.
nobody gave you an instruction manual of how to deal with the pain and the suffering and adversity in your life. And if your dad didn't give it to you, or they say it takes one person to pour into a child's life to change them, but we need the masculine and the feminine. Another deep conversation, anima and animus with Carl Jung.
Yeah, man.
But we don't have many great male mentors and role models. And these days, there's a lot of, and I'll shut up after this because this could be a whole other hour.
You're good,
A
man.
lot of the male influencers, especially the ex first responders, special forces guys, talk about and retreats, grab your balls and do harder things. So, like, I just presented at Morozco, Dr. Thomas Seeger, if you follow him.
Mm-mm.
I talked about cold plunge and sauna for first responder mental health. But if you're doing the sauna and cold plunge to challenge your friends on Instagram that I did a colder temperature longer than you, and I did a hotter temperature in the sauna for longer than you, dude, you're still feeding the ego. And a lot of dudes already know how to do hard things. The harder thing is therapy or
Mm.
meditation or yoga or
Or
getting a
rest.
massage and
Rest, right? For the
rest,
type A's, yeah.
recovery, inner child play. I mean, the Missouri retreat has ATVs, horseback riding, clay pigeon shooting. That's, you see these dudes laugh and play, and then they get on a kayak or they go fishing. That's the silence, the nature. the nervous system calms down, and then they start opening up. But you're not a bad person if you've done everything that most men and first responders and vets have done, because we're not teaching you in the academy or boot camp. And how many mentors and elders in your police station are saying, hey, are you paying attention to your sleep? You're taking your wife out on a date? Are you attending your kid's baseball game and dance recital? I mean, that's not really our culture. It's like, nah, mandatory overtime.
Yeah, dude. Okay, so I mean, there's so much that you've been sharing this whole conversation, but especially this latter chunk where I feel like you're speaking directly to me because, as I said, especially for people that are newer to the show, because people hop in at any time. Yeah, that's for sure me. Like that's a lot of not being close to my dad, and like why probably I became a cop. You know, from being this really meek kid to being like, you know, I'm gonna do something like important, right? And I'm gonna chase this like masculine thing, and then not thinking at all I would do like the canine, like and all the patrol, like really love that. Like that's not why I got into it. I thought it'd be a detective or something like that. But then that's what I resonated with, right? And then getting into the physicality of it and learning about strength and conditioning, and then becoming, and this is not to sound egotistical at all, but I became stronger and more athletically able than I would have ever thought I could do as a kid, for sure. Like I'd be like, there's no way you could lift that amount of weight, right? Like as a little kid, I was just like that's other people's stuff. So then coming to grapple with that, and then eventually doing more and more and more, like attacking everything with a warrior mentality, as you're talking about colder plunges and longer cold plunges, like when I was trying to fix my sleep, and there's confirmation bias, right? Because there are people that are like, oh yeah, keto, you know, I made like changed my life. It's the most amazing thing. And there are like specimens out there that can do keto and they can break records lifting weights and all that. So I'm doing like keto, I'm doing intermittent fasting, I'm like doing cold exposure, and my luckily I did blood work eventually, but everything was so bad, and there are downstream long-term consequences that I, you know, still dealing with hormonally because of it. And so it is to say, like, this is always a work in progress. This is just, you know, just a bit of sharing this because I know other people, if I did it, other people are gonna, you know, wonder like, man, I'm tapped out. How do I add cold plunges in? Well, maybe you need yoga, or maybe you need to just sit quietly for literally 20 minutes and just not have a device on you, right? Maybe you need to walk around the block with your dog and not have your phone on you, right? Maybe for 10 minutes, right? Just like Matt was saying earlier, like walk 3 times for 10 minutes. That's easy. Like you could even get like chug your glass of water in the morning, get your coffee pot going, and just get out before you're fully awake and just walk around. And then you do it at lunchtime, like help your food digest, and you do it in the evening with your family, right? Like simple. Like anyone can do that if we just remove the excuses. But yeah, man, I mean, I'm continually thinking like, cool, it's empowering to have the second half of life, but at the same time, you put this pressure on. If it's the warrior energy, you put this pressure on to be like, okay, cool, like what do I do with a whole nother life? If you look at it like that, like I got another, you know, 30 to 50 years left, I could do some pretty amazing stuff. But sometimes that's a very uh it's a very high pressure kind of thought to put on yourself.
Took some notes. If you got a couple minutes
I got a couple
in
minutes.
response. All right. There's no one size fits all approach. Even if I had the science to say, based on your blood, Eric, this is the perfect workout, the perfect diet, the perfect protocol for biohacking. Everybody's journey is unique and individual. And a lot of it may have to do with what your preferences or your resources are and whatever you can do long term, right? So, another thing, this mental health or spiritual or psychological journey is for life. So, if you're somebody that doesn't have abs or you've never benched 315 and you set that goal, and if you want to get abs and bench 315, it's going to be nutrition, sleep, stress management, self regulation, and the appropriate workouts. If you work really hard, then you get the 315 bench, then you get the abs. You can't stop doing that and maintain that bench in your abs. In fact, if you've ever heard the phrase training age, the longer you're training at something, the more incremental the gains will be. And that's the same with our consciousness. And I believe that having a big bench and abs is easier than doing the journey with our head and our heart. So there's no one size fits all. There's no magic button, whether it's keto or carnivore fasting or SGB shot or ketamine assisted therapy or psychedelic and I tell people to go to Boulder Crest and Save a Warrior retreats, but that will be dipping your toes and hopefully you have an awakening that if I want to keep abs and have a decent bench, I'm going to be working out hard, paying attention, nutrition and sleep and stress the rest of my life. So the mental, the emotional, the spiritual journey, you've really woken up when you realize it's not one and done. It's not, I have the answer and I'm going to turn around and be the life coach and tell everybody else how to fix their problem before I even hear their life story and the different variables or their preferences. So, in the doing hard things, and I've gone, I don't know how many iterations of this I've had, Eric. I could write a book about it. Is the harder things later in life is to surrender to the unknown, to the uncertainty, and to the mystery, and realize you cannot intellectually figure everything out.
Yep.
I could give you 1,000 books that I have of Hollis and other authors, and they will help you. But there's going to be other work you have to do. You can read books about weightlifting and nutrition and meditation, but if you're not doing meditation and lifting weights, like you're not going to get stronger. So practical applications of the basics with experiential learning. And it's really hard to learn that there are things that are going to be out of my control that I can't use willpower or intellect or work ethic to solve. That's the harder thing that I will grow by surrendering and letting go to some things. And that's, again, another 3-hour conversation, but that's the doing hard thing. So when there's men's retreats or retreats for veterans and first responders in their 50s, like some of my SWAT buddies, that they're rucking, they're going through a shoot house, they're spraying cold water on each other and crawling through the mud. I'm like, dude, you guys are already, and somebody's barking to be a better entrepreneur, a better husband, a better father. By the way, that's all sympathetic nervous system. So that's gas pedal. This is reinforcing the stupid shit we do too much of. And it's still involving like the ego versus, hey, dude, we're gonna go do some meditation and yoga and journaling. Or I think my Missouri retreat unexpectedly worked out perfect to see the blend of clay pigeon shooting, shooting tannerite, horseback riding, roping, but then quiet time in nature on a boat or a kayak with it. So the inner child play and then the calmness in nature. But the hard lesson is it's not always training harder, and I'm not going to be able to figure everything out.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I love that. And I think that a way to kind of bridge it and kind of bring us towards the close is, it is that like that release, right? Like you're talking about, like, I'm not going to have this all figured out. And then there's even a wisdom in that. Like you figure out so much by realizing you're not going to figure things out. And like, it's almost like the more you learn about something, the more you realize, like, I don't know jack shit, right? Like, you can read all these books. Like I love reading philosophy, and I toggle on and off from reading a lot lately to just like dipping my toe a little bit more. But then it's like the more assured you are towards something, you're like, man, I don't even grasp it, right? And that there's a beauty to that, right? And so it is to say, maybe the bringing it all back together is like, what is your goal? What is your mission? And I've said it before, I'll say it again. Like, I highly recommend everyone start writing down some key values, virtues, like whether it's like when we start sliding away from like the life we want to live or the life that we think is best for us and our families and our teams, our departments, whatever, the community, the greater whole, what do you do to bring it back to center? Like, what is your compass? And you might have a goal that's like, I need to smack myself and get back into shape, and I want to do hard things. Cool, then go to one of the retreats that Matt just mentioned. But if it is to say like, I need to release, and like I am the 315 bench guy, but I'm wrapping every literal joint in my body and warming up for 30 minutes to get it. But I need to realize that at my age, or because of injury, like, I don't need to be the 315 guy anymore, right? Like, and I remember that archetype. We talk about archetypes. Like, every big box gym I've ever been at as an adult, like, there was the 315 guy, and he's usually like over 40 or 50, but he would just like, he would set up, and everyone, the younger guys are like, oh man, he's a strong dude. But like, literally, looking back, I'm like, he was like just dancing with injury. Like, it's just, he had to do that. He had to build up to his 3 plates, and then he'd go home for the day, and he'd do it once or twice a week. But like, just to graduate beyond and evolve past having to be that 315 guy, and maybe you become, I'm more mobile than all my friends at my age group guy. And that's pretty badass too. And it's just realizing we can try on different hats and be more than that, like what one physical plane. But yeah, anyway, to come back, what is the goal? What is the mission? How do you play with all these little toggles and levers that Matt has so well introduced us, or like done the deep dive rabbit hole down many of them or all of them, because it is a work in progress and we're always going to be fine tuning it because we're continually different.
And a lot of what you talked about, Eric, could be talking about spirituality, because we all demonstrate a spirituality by how we live out our lives. You show me your values by how you're walking the talk at work and with your family. But if I don't define my values, like you said, and then have some kind of self regulation or calming or grounding practice to be in touch with my head and heart, and then self reflect every day or take a half day a week, am I living according to the values that I believe in? So, do I have a lighthouse? And as you said, can I read the compass? So, you have to define and find the lighthouse, and you got to know how to read your compass. So, what are your values? And to self reflect, you need to self regulate. And then you would know if you're on track or not. But I think a lot of people are not defining their own values, and they're living based on the expectations of the police culture or the masculine culture or the warrior archetype as society may be demonstrating it, especially online.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that, and I think that that key in, as you've illustrated, that key for mentorship is so huge in our culture, right? And to get permission, and I'll say real quick, because we're tight on time, and I need to have you back on. Already have plans germinating in my head, but I have a mentor who's, a lot of his career resonates with me. Like, he did a lot of things. He wore a lot of hats. He's in leadership, and he's been in like tactics and, all these other things, but also extracurriculars. Like, he was consulting and coaching and doing all these things and doing more and more and more. And even considering like a project I was looking at earlier this year, talking to him, and, him just saying like, man, I'm at this point where I want to focus in on family and, my main job and all that. Like, it gave me a lot of permission to be like, dude, you don't have to do more. Like, focus in on what it is that's important now. But just even for those that are crushing it, to say like, yeah, I could take a step back or just take a pause. Again, what is the goal? What's the mission? But anyway, I just want to share that because I think it would hit for some people. But Matt, man, we covered, I think, a lot of ground. Not all the ground, because you're going to be back. I'm committing it now. Yeah, is there anything you want to leave us with, leave the listeners with, and then if folks want to reach out, where they can find you?
Couple quotes I always throw out: we can only see others as deeply as we see ourselves. So work on your own shit first. You want to influence other people? Change your habits and lifestyle, and your family and people at work will see it. Also, we can't give away that which we do not possess for ourselves: self love, self worth, self respect. And a lot of times when you see people like chipping off or being hot headed, it's because really they don't love themselves. And sometimes that's a hard thing to do. I said them earlier: pain that is not transformed is transmitted. And if you don't heal what hurt you, you will bleed on people that did not cut you. Often that's the family. A lot of adverse childhood experiences for a lot of first responders and veterans are getting, those wounds are unconsciously scratched when you're going to the shootings, the domestics, and these other calls. So work on those things. And anybody, you can find me at my website, tacticalchaplain.com. Matt Domyancic on LinkedIn, Thin Blue Line Spirituality on Instagram, and The Tactical Chaplain on Instagram.
Matt Domyancic, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Eric. Total honor.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.